All right, welcome back to the deep dive.
Yeah, welcome back.
You know how we do things here, right? You've got something you're really curious about, something you want to explore more deeply. You send us your sources and we get to work.
Exactly. We dig through everything you send and bring you back the good stuff, the insights, the key takeaways, all that.
And hopefully, by the end of it all, you feel like you've gotten a real solid grasp of the topic.
Yeah, that's the goal. A shortcut to understanding so you can go out there and apply that knowledge.
Well, today we're diving into something that's, I'd say, pretty universally relevant. We're talking about life lessons.
Mm-hmm. Universal indeed.
You sent us a transcript this time from a QuoteTube video titled, and this is a pretty strong title, "These Life Lessons Are Requirements in Life, Not Choices."
Yeah, that title's definitely making a statement, isn't it?
It is, it is. And there's a lot to unpack there, right? What
Yeah.
actually constitutes a requirement in life? So in this deep dive, we're going to really break down these so-called requirements. We'll pull out the ones that offer the most food for thought, the actionable steps, and we'll explore them together in a way that's hopefully insightful, not overwhelming.
Makes sense. And looking through the material you sent, it's pretty comprehensive, touching on all sorts of things.
Yeah.
How we see our past and future, our own inner world, how we connect with other people, the whole drive for personal growth. It's all kind of intertwined in there.
Yeah, it really is. Well, let's get started then. And I think a good place to begin is with this idea of time.
Okay, time.
The transcript comes out strong right away, saying, never go to the past, not for happiness, not for justification, not for excuses. And then right after that, it hits us with this really concise wisdom. Don't look back. You are not going that way. It's really thought-provoking, right? It makes you think about where your focus is, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. And I think what's interesting is it's not just saying forget the past, it's pointing us towards the present and the future.
Right.
Like there's this call to action implied there. But then a little later on, it also says, remember that what you now have was once among the things you only hoped for. So it's acknowledging that there's a way to remember the past, but through a lens of gratitude
Hmm.
for progress. It's about learning without getting stuck.
I like that. That's a good distinction.
Yeah.
It's about perspective, right? Not erasing the past, but changing how we see it, how we relate to it. And that actually flows nicely into what the transcript says about the future.
Okay.
It says, do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about itself. Each day has enough trouble of its own, which is a clear message about being present.
Yeah, very present focus.
So thinking practically, what are the benefits of adopting this kind of mindset? Not dwelling on the past, not fretting about the future.
Well, if we zoom out a bit and think about well-being in general, one of the biggest sources of stress and anxiety is constantly worrying about what might happen, right?
Right.
So by really focusing on the present moment, you're putting your energy into what you can actually control, what you can influence right now, instead of getting lost in all these what ifs.
Mm-hmm. Makes a lot of sense.
And this really aligns with a lot of practices out there that are designed to help people become more mindful, reduce anxiety, all that.
Makes sense. And speaking of having that kind of agency in the present, shaping what comes next, there's another line in the transcript that's really interesting. It says, this is your world, shape it, or someone else will. Pretty powerful, right? It's like a direct call to take ownership of our lives.
It is. And it raises this fundamental question, doesn't it?
Yeah.
About how consciously we're actually living our lives.
Yeah.
Are we really making choices and pursuing what we want? Or are we kind of just letting things happen to us, letting other people's agendas dictate our path?
Right.
The transcript's definitely advocating for a more intentional approach.
I think that's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
All right, let's shift gears a little bit and look inward now. The transcript has a lot to say about how we perceive ourselves, how we talk to ourselves.
Oh, yeah. Inner world.
Yeah, exactly. And there's this warning early on that really resonated with me. It says, of all the liars in the world, sometimes the worst are our own fears. Why do you think our fears can be so deceptive?
Well, it's insightful because what it's saying is that our fears often aren't based in reality. They're based on assumptions and worst-case scenarios that haven't even happened, right?
Right.
But those internal stories, those narratives, they can be so convincing, so persuasive, and they can keep us from actually pursuing opportunities, taking risks that we need to take.
Yeah, they hold us back.
It's like the mind's way of trying to protect us, but it ends up overestimating the danger and limiting our potential.
It's like a self-fulfilling prophecy almost.
Almost, yeah. And right after that, there's this really beautiful piece of advice that says, practice self-compassion. We are all human, and everyone makes mistakes. It's like a gentle reminder.
Hmm.
How does self-compassion actually help us in a practical way?
It really
Well,
is.
self-compassion is so crucial for our ability to bounce back from things, for growth, for resilience.
Hmm.
Because when we mess up, when we face setbacks, it's often our own inner critic that's the harshest, right? So by practicing self-compassion, we're essentially treating ourselves with the same kindness and understanding that we would offer a friend going through something similar.
Yeah, yeah, I can see that.
It creates a more positive inner dialogue, and it allows us to actually learn from our experiences without getting stuck in all that shame and self-blame.
So true. Okay, there's this line that really made me stop and think. It says, thinking is the hardest work there is, which is probably the reason why so few engage in it. And it's true. It's like those moments of deep focus and concentration. They can be so taxing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, they do.
Why do you think that is? Why is genuine thinking so hard?
Well, from a cognitive perspective, it's actually really energy intensive.
Hmm.
When you're thinking deeply, you're actively engaging different parts of your brain, you're processing information, making connections, often challenging your existing beliefs.
Right,
And
right.
our brains, they live efficiency,
Mm.
you know.
Mm-hmm.
So really engaging in this sustained critical thinking, it takes conscious effort, and it can be tiring, genuinely tiring.
Yeah.
And that's why it's a skill. It's something that needs to be practiced and cultivated.
I hadn't thought about it like that. That's really interesting. Okay, another thought about our inner state. The transcript says, manage your mood, because if it does not obey, then it commands. So it's talking about the power of our emotions.
Yeah, very directly.
How can we get better at managing our moods in a practical sense?
Well, the first step is self-awareness, right?
Mm-hmm.
Being able to recognize those triggers, those things that set you off emotionally,
Mm.
and understanding how you typically respond. Because once you have that awareness, you can actually start to intervene more effectively.
Okay, I like that.
Practices like mindfulness can help, and also different emotional regulation techniques.
Okay.
Things like reframing negative thoughts, taking a break to calm down when you need to. Those things can be really helpful in preventing those moods from spiraling out of control.
Right. That makes sense.
It's about becoming the driver of your emotional state instead of letting it drive you, essentially.
That's a good way to put it. Oh, two more quick thoughts on the self that I wanted to touch on. The transcript says, be proud of how hard you are trying, which I think is such a lovely sentiment. And at your lowest, you realize a lot. So there's definitely this idea of growth and learning even during difficult times, right?
Oh, absolutely. There's
Yeah.
something about those low points. They're painful, but they can bring this incredible clarity,
Yeah.
a deeper understanding of ourselves, of what truly matters.
Yeah.
It's where resilience is built.
It's true. It's like you come out the other side with a new perspective.
Yep.
Okay, let's zoom out a bit more and talk about how we interact with the world around us, starting with friendships.
All right, friendships.
The transcript gives us this advice. Make and keep friends with the people you want to emulate, not the people that you think will be most likely to accept you. So it's talking about choosing your friends intentionally.
Mm.
What's the impact of choosing your friends based on people you admire, people you look up to?
Well, one of the key things here is that we are shaped by the people we surround ourselves with,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So by consciously choosing friends who embody qualities we admire or who are maybe further along the paths we want to be on, it's like we're creating this environment that supports our own growth.
Okay.
It's about being around people who inspire you, who
Mhm.
challenge you in a positive way, instead of just settling for what's comfortable or convenient.
I love that. It's like being intentional about who you let into your life.
Exactly. Exactly.
Okay, then there's this warning, and it's pretty strong. Never overlook contempt. When someone views you with contempt and talks to you like you're beneath them, they will likely do you harm, whether relationally, socially, or physically remove that person from your life. Why is contempt such a damaging emotion, particularly in our relationships?
Contempt is unique in its negativity. It goes beyond just disagreeing with someone or disliking them.
Right.
It's like the sense of superiority, a feeling that you are fundamentally better than the other person,
Yeah.
and it diminishes their worth in your eyes.
Okay.
That kind of dynamic, it's toxic, and it really erodes the foundation of any healthy relationship. The advice to remove those individuals from your life, it's really about protecting yourself,
Hmm.
protecting your self-esteem, your well-being from that constantly negative, demeaning influence.
Sometimes that's easier said than done.
Oh, for sure.
But it's good advice, for sure. Okay, this next one might be a little controversial, but I think there's truth to it. It says, it's no use wasting time worrying what other people think about you. No one is thinking about you. What do you think?
It's blunt, but it's kind of liberating in a way, isn't it?
It is,
It
yeah.
reminds us that we all have this egocentric bias.
Mm-hmm.
We assume that everyone's paying attention to us, judging our every move, analyzing our every thought, when in reality, most people are preoccupied with their own lives and their own
Each
worries.
got their own stuff going on.
Exactly. And recognizing that can free up so much mental and emotional energy that
Yeah.
we waste on worrying about what other people think.
Absolutely. I think a lot of people needed to hear that. All right, moving on. The transcript also gives us these interesting guidelines for navigating our social interactions. It says, be correct with everyone sociable, with many close to the elect, friend to the few. It's like different levels of connection, right?
It is, yes.
Yeah.
It's like a layered approach to how we engage with other people.
Mm.
So being correct means being polite, being respectful in
Right.
all our interactions. Then, being sociable with many means having that wider network of acquaintances, engaging with people in a positive way.
Okay.
And then finally, reserving that deep intimacy, being close to the elect friend to the few, acknowledges that those truly meaningful connections, they require more, they require deeper investment, shared values, all of that.
Yeah, it's like different levels of trust, different levels of vulnerability.
Exactly.
Okay, no surprise here. The golden rule makes an appearance. It says, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. It's like this universal principle, right? Why do you think it stood the test of time like this?
Well, I think it's because it's rooted in empathy and reciprocity.
Mm-hmm.
It's asking us to step outside of ourselves for a moment and consider how our actions impact other people,
Right.
and then to treat them with the same consideration that we would want for ourselves.
Yeah, yeah.
It promotes fairness, compassion,
Mm-hmm.
understanding our shared humanity. It's fundamental.
Couldn't agree more. Okay, last one on relationships for now. It says, trust wisely and not blindly. And then it follows that up with this stark reminder, trust can be shattered in seconds. What are the key differences between trusting wisely and trusting blindly?
Well, I think the key difference is that wise trust is earned.
Mm.
It's based on someone's consistent behavior,
Hmm.
their demonstrated integrity.
Okay.
There's a level of discernment there, and it allows for the possibility that people aren't perfect.
Right, right.
Whereas blind trust, that's given without question, without evidence,
Mm-hmm.
often based on wishful thinking or maybe a desire to avoid conflict.
Yeah, I can see that.
And I think the fact that trust can be broken so easily highlights how valuable it is and how much it can hurt when it's betrayed.
Yeah, that's so true.
And it really underscores the importance of choosing carefully who we trust.
Absolutely. All right, let's dive into this whole idea of personal growth, of taking action in our lives. And there's this line that, I don't know about you, but it really hit me hard. It says, it is not a lack of time, it is a lack of priority. Ouch, right? But it's probably true for a lot of us.
It is, yeah. It's a bit of a wake-up call.
For sure. How can we get better at figuring out what our real priorities are and then actually acting on them?
Well, that statement is forcing us to confront this discrepancy
Mm-hmm.
between how we're spending our time and what we claim is important to us.
Yeah, that gap.
To really figure out our true priorities, we need to take a hard look at our values, our long-term goals, and what truly brings us meaning, what brings us satisfaction. Once we're clear about those things, then we can look at how we're actually spending our time
Yeah,
and make adjustments to bring those two things into alignment.
it makes sense.
And often that involves saying no to things that don't really serve those priorities.
Saying no is hard,
It is hard, yeah.
but necessary sometimes.
Absolutely. And then there's this idea that I think might seem a bit counterintuitive at first. It says, through discipline comes freedom. Can you explain that connection a bit more?
Yeah, that's a head scratcher for sure.
Yeah, so what it's saying is that by establishing structure, by having consistent habits in certain areas of our lives, we actually create more space, more flexibility in other areas.
I see. So it's like a trade-off.
Kind of. Like, if you think about it, having a disciplined financial plan can mean you're not constantly stressed about money, right?
Oh, yeah, that would be freeing.
Right. Or consistently practicing a skill, that discipline can lead to greater mastery, more creative freedom.
Okay, I get it.
Discipline is like the framework
Yeah.
that supports greater autonomy. It frees us from the chaos of procrastination, from feeling overwhelmed, all of that.
That's a good way to look at it. Okay, this next bit of advice really resonated with me. There's such a sense of self-respect in it. It says, never force, don't beg, and don't chase.
Yeah, strong words.
What do you think it's getting at?
I think it's about recognizing your own inherent worth.
Mm-hmm.
Because those actions, forcing, begging, chasing, They often come from a place of feeling inadequate, like you need external validation.
Right, you're trying to get something from someone else.
Exactly. The transcript suggesting a more empowered approach.
Okay.
Recognizing your own value, not trying to compel others to give you their attention or affection or approval.
So it's about coming from a place of self-respect
Exactly.
and letting things unfold more naturally.
Yeah, that's it.
I like that. Okay, a short and sweet one. The time for action is now. No ambiguity there.
Right to the point.
What do you think is the biggest hurdle that keeps people from taking action?
I think for a lot of people, it's fear, right?
Mm-hmm.
Fear of failure, the discomfort of getting out of your comfort zone.
Yeah,
Procrastination is often a symptom of that.
for sure.
And I think a big part of overcoming that inertia is breaking down those bigger tasks, those big goals,
Okay.
into smaller, more manageable steps. And then just focusing on taking that first step, even if it feels imperfect.
Just get started.
That's it. And then you build momentum from there.
That's a good strategy.
Yeah.
This next one's a really interesting perspective. It says, life isn't about finding yourself. Life is about creating yourself. It kind of reframes the whole journey as self-discovery, doesn't it?
It does. It's shifting the emphasis, right?
Yeah.
It's not about there being this pre-existing true self that you have to uncover.
Hmm.
It's more about recognizing that our identities are constantly evolving.
Okay.
They're shaped by our choices, by our experiences, by our actions.
Right. It's an active process.
Exactly. And it's empowering because it means we get to actively participate in defining who we become instead of just passively accepting some fixed identity.
Yeah, that's a powerful way to think about it. Okay, the transcript emphasizes learning from mistakes over and over again. It says mistakes are essential to learning anything. And then a little later, it repeats it, almost word for word. Slow down and realize that mistakes are essential to learning anything. Why is it so important to embrace mistakes as part of the process?
Well, mistakes are incredibly valuable.
Mm-hmm.
They give us feedback, they
Okay.
show us what doesn't work, and they give us a chance to adjust our approach.
Okay, I like that.
And by slowing down, really reflecting on our mistakes, we can learn deeper lessons, avoid making those same mistakes again in the future.
Yeah.
And when we view mistakes as part of the learning process, it helps us develop a growth mindset, right?
Mm-hmm.
It reduces that fear of failure, which can be such a huge obstacle to progress.
It's so true. It's like giving yourself permission to mess up sometimes.
It is, yeah.
Yeah.
And learning from it.
Okay, here's a piece of advice that's so practical and so often overlooked. If you don't ask, you don't get. It seems so obvious, but why do you think people hesitate to ask for what they want?
Well, I think it's a lot of things. Fear of rejection, anticipating a negative response, maybe underestimating your own worth.
Mm-hmm. That's all those insecurities, right?
It is, yeah. But the truth is, opportunities are often missed simply because people don't ask.
That's true.
And even if the answer is no, you haven't really lost anything. You're just where you were before you asked. But you've opened the door to that possibility of a positive outcome.
It's like, what's the worst that can happen?
Right,
You
exactly.
get a no. Okay, move on. All right, last one in this section on growth. It says, he who is not courageous enough to take risks will accomplish nothing in life. Pretty strong statement. What do you think is a courageous risk in the context of personal growth?
Well, a courageous risk, it doesn't have to be something reckless or dangerous.
Right.
In terms of personal growth, it's often about stepping into uncertainty, facing the possibility of failing, allowing yourself to be vulnerable in pursuit of something meaningful.
Mm.
It could be starting a new project or expressing your true feelings to someone, anything that pushes you outside that comfort zone.
Yeah, anything where you're facing that fear and doing it anyway
That's it.
for a larger purpose.
Hmm.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit and talk about something a bit more tangible, money and possessions, all that.
Yeah.
The transcript gets right to the point with this advice. Start saving you money. Don't spend it on homes. You can't afford fancy cars, and running your credit cards to the max. In the end, you'll be much happier. Sounds like a recipe for financial well-being.
It does.
Why do you think financial stability is so often linked to happiness?
Well, I think it's because financial stability creates a sense of security.
Mm-hmm.
It reduces a lot of the stress that comes with worrying about basic needs, unexpected expenses, all of that. It gives you more autonomy, more choice in your life. And while money itself doesn't buy happiness, it's true, not having that constant financial worry can significantly improve your overall quality of life, your well-being.
For sure.
So the advice here is about creating those sustainable financial habits.
Yeah.
and not getting caught up in that short-term gratification, those material things.
I like that. Okay, this next piece of advice really aligns with something that's gaining a lot of popularity these days, the whole minimalist movement. It says, the less possessions you own, the happier and less burden you will have in your life. What are the potential psychological benefits of owning less stuff?
Well, I think one of the biggest benefits is just that reduction in clutter,
Okay,
both physically and mentally,
it's
right?
like clearing space.
It is. It's clearing space. It frees up time and energy that you might otherwise be spending on managing, maintaining all that stuff.
Hmm,
And it can also shift your focus away from acquiring more things
okay.
to experiences, to relationships, which are often more strongly linked to lasting happiness.
It's like shifting your values, right?
Yeah, and there's a real sense of liberation that can come with not being so attached to material possessions, not being burdened by them.
There's something to be said for simplicity, isn't there?
Definitely.
All right, here's a really interesting contrast that the transcript draws between wealth and wants. It says, wealth consists not in having great possessions, but in having few wants. That's a different way of thinking about wealth, isn't it?
It is. It challenges the traditional idea of wealth,
Yeah.
and it suggests that contentment comes more from managing your desires than from accumulating more and more.
So it's like an internal state rather than an external one.
Exactly.
Hmm.
If your wants are simple, if you don't need a lot to feel satisfied, you can find that sense of abundance, that richness in things that aren't material.
I like that. It's a good reminder. And finally, on this topic, it reminds us that memories are the real treasures of life, emphasizing experiences over possessions. Why do you think experiences tend to bring more lasting happiness?
Well, I think it's because experiences become a part of who we are.
Hmm.
They're integrated into our sense of self. They provide opportunities to learn, to grow, to connect with other people.
Hmm.
And we tend to remember the emotions, the stories from our experiences more than we remember specific possessions, right?
Yeah, they shape our narrative.
They do.
Hmm.
And those shared experiences, they strengthen our relationships. They create lasting bonds with people.
Absolutely. All right, let's move on to the importance of truth and honesty. The transcript gives us some very clear guidelines here. It says, if you tell the truth, you don't have to remember anything. And if it's not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it. These are like fundamental principles for ethical living, aren't they?
They are, yeah. And they highlight the simplicity of living authentically.
Right.
Honesty builds trust, both in our relationships and in ourselves.
Hmm.
When we're truthful, our actions and our words align.
Yeah.
It reduces that inner conflict,
Right.
and it promotes a sense of inner peace.
That makes sense. It's like you're not carrying around the weight of those lies.
Right. And these guidelines, they offer a pretty straightforward framework for navigating those ethical dilemmas that we all face.
That's true. Okay, here's an observation that's a little bit cynical, but maybe there's some truth to it. It says, often the lies that are believed become the truth. How can that happen? How does a lie become accepted as truth?
I think it speaks to the power of misinformation
Hmm.
and how repeated falsehoods, especially when they're amplified within certain groups, can start to be accepted as reality.
Like echo chambers almost.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it underscores the importance of critical thinking, of verifying information, of being aware of how people, especially those in positions of power, can manipulate narratives, even if those narratives aren't true.
Yeah, it's a cautionary tale for sure.
Mm.
All right, bringing it back to relationships, the transcript says very plainly, if you want to be trusted, be honest. Kind of goes without saying, right?
It does, but it's a fundamental truth.
Mm-hmm.
Trust is the foundation of strong relationships, and honesty is what builds that trust, what maintains it.
Yeah.
Even when the truth is hard to face, being transparent, acting with integrity, that's usually the best path to creating genuine connection, building healthy relationships over the long term.
It's about being real, being authentic, even when it's hard.
Absolutely.
Okay, let's talk about those inevitable challenges and changes that life throws at us. The transcript offers this analogy. Life is like a book. Some chapters are sad, some are happy, but all are necessary for the full story. How can this perspective help us when we're going through tough times?
Well, it gives us a sense of context,
Okay.
a sense of purpose in those struggles.
Mm.
It reminds us that life is a journey with ups and downs,
Right.
and that even those difficult chapters, those sad chapters, they contribute to our growth, to the richness of our story overall.
They make us who we are.
Exactly. And this perspective can help us build resilience.
Okay.
It can help us find meaning, even in those challenging experiences, knowing that they're part of a larger story unfolding.
It's about seeing the bigger picture. Okay, this next one really speaks to living authentically. It says, always move in your own direction, not according to society, friends, or family. What are some of the pressures that can pull us away from our own path, do you think?
Well, there are so many, right? Societal expectations, cultural norms, pressure from our peers,
Hmm.
the desires and expectations of our families, all of those things can have a huge influence on our choices.
Yeah, they can be really powerful.
And it takes a lot of self-awareness
Hmm.
and courage to identify what our own values are, what we aspire to,
Okay.
and then to make choices that are aligned with those things, even when they're different from what the people around us expect or want for us.
Yeah, sometimes you got to go against the grain
Sometimes you do.
to be true to yourself. Okay, here's a powerful thought for those times when you're feeling down, when things are tough.
Yeah.
The pain you feel today will be the strength you feel tomorrow. It's about that capacity for resilience, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
Yeah.
It's about recognizing that going through difficult things, overcoming adversity, it builds inner strength.
Hmm.
It builds resilience. It expands our capacity to cope with future challenges.
Okay.
When we navigate those hard experiences,
Mm.
we learn about ourselves, we
Mm.
learn about the world,
Right.
and we develop new skills, new perspectives that ultimately make us stronger.
It's like what doesn't kill you makes you stronger.
Kind
Yeah.
of, yeah.
Yeah.
And experiencing that pain also allows us to have more empathy for others who are
Yeah.
struggling.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. You can relate on a deeper level.
Yeah.
Okay, two great reframes for dealing with setbacks. The first one, sometimes you win, sometimes you learn. And then failure is a bruise, not a tattoo. Both very healthy mindsets, right?
They are. They help us shift our perspective on setbacks.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of seeing them as these definitive endings,
Yeah.
we start to see them as opportunities for growth, opportunities for learning.
Okay, so it's about the process.
Yeah, that's it.
Right.
Sometimes you learn reminds us that even when we don't get the outcome we wanted, there's still a valuable lesson there.
Right.
And failure is a bruise, not a tattoo. Emphasizes the temporary nature of mistakes, right?
Mm. Yeah, they don't define us.
They don't define us permanently. They fade.
Okay, good advice all around. And of course, perseverance gets a mention. Never give up on something you really want. Simple but powerful, right?
It is. What's the key to persevering when you face those obstacles, those challenges along the way?
What do you think?
Having a clear sense of purpose,
Hmm.
a strong connection to your goal. That's crucial.
Okay.
Breaking down those big goals into smaller steps, more manageable steps, that can help maintain momentum too.
Right, so you don't get overwhelmed.
And it's helpful to remind yourself of past successes.
Mm-hmm.
Surround yourself with people who support you. That encouragement can make a big difference.
It's about that belief in yourself, right? That you can achieve what you set out to do,
Exactly.
even when things get tough.
Okay, a really hopeful thought to wrap up this section. You can't go back and change the beginning, but you can start where you are and change the ending. It's like taking control of the narrative,
It is, yeah. It's about agency.
recognizing that while we can't undo the past, we can always make choices in the present that will shape our future.
Right. The power is in the present.